Hello, welcome back my bookish dweebs. How are you? Welcome back to my channel. This is going to be a video all about the BookTok books that I thought actually deserved the hype. BookTok is probably at the moment the biggest place where people find out what to read next. That, and if you're over a certain generation, you're probably looking at the New York Times best-selling list or something, or whatever's cheap on Amazon. But realistically, social media, and particularly BookTok, is where a lot of people are finding their BookTok recommendations. And realistically, a lot of them are pretty crap. There's a lot, and I'm going to do another video of books that I thought were overhyped, and that's going to be a controversial video because I know there's at least two in there that I have already received some backlash on my BookTok itself. But I'm going to list out 10 BookTok books that I thought were worth the hype. So stick around for that because these books are books you should actually pick up and I can guarantee you will actually like from what you've seen all over social media. So stick around. Okay, so the first book is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Now, this is actually a book that was recommended to me by a friend, and I didn't actually see it on social media until after I'd finished reading it. Now, The Midnight Library is about Nora, and she goes off and she's allowed to essentially, rather than die, experience what her life could have been like in many different worlds and universes. And then it's about the story of, okay, if your life was different, would you have preferred it? And it's quite interesting. She essentially is based around the Midnight Library. She's in a library. She can pick which life she wants to go and look at, that sort of thing. And as with, I think, a lot of Matt Haig's books, I've not read any others, but again, the friend that recommended me this has read others of his and says it's a very similar thing. There's often some sort of philosophical or bigger meaning to them. So there's often a look at your life, think about whatever you think is bad. Is it actually that bad? And the Midnight Library kind of does that. I think she's kind of looking into... So I'll read the back and you get a better understanding. Nora's life has been going from bad to worse. Then at the stroke of midnight on her last day on Earth, she finds herself transported to a library. There she is given the chance to undergo her regrets and try out each of the different lives she might have lived, which raises the ultimate question. With infinite choices, what is the best way to live? And so it's a really interesting book, really profound, and I really enjoyed it. And it was short, which is always a win. If you can enjoy a story and it's in less than 300 pages, it's a win-win for everybody because then you can get onto another book as well and feel even more accomplished. So a book I think is worth the hype from TikTok is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. The next book on this list is One Day by David Nichols. Now, you'll have seen me talk about this all the bloody time on my TikTok. I talked about it in my most recent video where I talked about my favourite books basically of all time and books that I think are utterly fantastic and I'll take no criticism on, and that's One Day. And One Day, I think, received hype after the Netflix series went viral as well. Basically what happened is this has been out for quite a few years and they'd done a movie about it a while ago and the movie wasn't great, and then they did a TV series about it earlier on this year on Netflix that was utterly fantastic, absolutely nailed the tone of the book that this is trying to deliver. Now, this book is about Emma and Dexter, and essentially they meet at graduation. They've been going to the same school the whole time, but they never knew it, and then they meet at graduation, and they kind of have this one night together, and it's not like the one night together you would think from most romance books. They end up just kind of talking and laughing with each other and ending up thinking, okay, this person fascinates me, and that's what I really loved about this book. Then what happens over the next few decades is they kind of spend time with each other and without each other, and they end up in different relationships, and it all kind of ends up being about them too and what they mean to each other and what are they friends, is there something more, what is the point of them? And there's a moment in it that will utterly break your heart. And I remember reading it, I was reading it at home, I was sitting there reading it and I was just like flipping, and I read it and I was like, oh my god. And I had to take a second to kind of stop to be like, wow, okay, that's actually impacted me. And it will break your bloody heart. It's fantastic. It's the best example I've ever seen of romance, of love, of true love. And it's brilliant. I really would recommend it if you're somebody that's into romance, because this is proper romance. This isn't kind of, I don't know, what you see sometimes in romantasy where you've got, oh, he's really good looking and I can't be with him because he's the prince. No, this Dexter is not a great guy. Emma is a great girl. She knows he's not a great guy. She doesn't really want to be with him most of the time, but then sometimes she does. And it's not because she can't have him. It's just because there's something deeper about him. It's such a brilliant book. One Day by David Nichols is the second book on this list. I would highly recommend this if you've not yet had a chance to check it out. The next book is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. This has actually recently been turned into an Apple TV series. I say recently, months ago now. And the Apple TV series does it fair justice as well. But Lessons in Chemistry follows the story of chemist Elizabeth Zott. And she's essentially a genius during the 1960s. When women can't be geniuses, obviously they can, but in society they can't, because men are the geniuses. Men are the ones that make big discoveries and work in big offices. But as well as kind of being a genius, she also has a kind of attitude about her that means she's not going to take that kind of nonsense from anybody. She isn't there to appease people. She's not there to kind of be like, oh, I'm a woman, I'm not allowed to do this stuff. She's like, I'm just going to do it because I'm a human being and that's what we do. It's unfortunate you're not as smart as me. She meets the kind of lead chemist at the place that she works and essentially then goes on to have kind of a romantic relationship with him, and then something happens and everything falls down, and essentially she ends up then working on a TV show called Lessons in Chemistry. I think it was called that. Anyway, I've not read this actually for a few months, where she essentially uses chemistry to bake, and it's a baking show, so it appeases, you know, the men in power, women doing baking shows. Oh, how fun, just before dinner. But she starts to use this platform to not only teach women and children and the world about science and how things work and why things bake and why things cook and things like this, but also she uses it as a chance to empower women. She says things like, okay kids, go set the table for your children. And she talks to women like, for the first time I imagine in society, they are equals to men. They are sometimes better than men. They are more useful. They're an incredibly useful element of society, and it's brilliant. Elizabeth's funny. The actual story has got heartbreaking moments in it. It's very powerful. At the same time, she's so intelligent that at the time in the 1960s, again, there's a family of colour that she goes to speak to and is what ends up being one of her best friends. And other people are like, oh, that's crazy that you're friends with somebody of colour. And they're like, she's like, why? Why? Let's not be stupid about it. And it's brilliant. I love everything about it. The meanings, the ideas behind it, it's fantastic. It's got a fantastic front cover, a decent TV series that you could watch alongside it as well, and is without a doubt a book from BookTok that I saw everywhere when it kind of first came out. It is 100% worth the hype. Now this one may not be as well known, so this is Iron Widow by Jiran J. Zhao, but I've seen it kind of getting a bit more hype recently, and I just did a Google of some of the biggest BookTok books at the moment, and this is one that's receiving a lot of traction from that. I'm hoping it's because of my video saying how brilliant it was. So this is a book by Jiran J. Zhao, as I just said, based on a world, and stick with me here, where men control mecha robots using something called chi, which is essentially their willpower to fight off aliens' invasions that's attacking this place. And they can also put women in co-pilot seats and extract their chi to power these robots, and sometimes that kills the women. Yeah, in itself, I kind of love the idea, not the whole idea of sucking out women's chi, just the idea of kind of mecha bots and stuff. Anyway, what the story is then about is the prologue's kind of, there's this greatest warrior of all time in this mecha bot, and he kills one of these women to try and defend off this latest group of aliens. This woman then has a sister, and the book is about the sister rising up and wanting to become a pilot of her own, but she's a woman. Again, we've got a bit of a theme here with lessons in chemistry as well, but she's a woman, so she can't. She has to be a co-pilot, but she goes on to prove it. Now, they all have this chi that I'm talking about, has like a rating, a score, and essentially she's got a really bloody high one. So she's allowed. It's so much drama. And the reason I loved it is it's just so much action. It's just constant action. There is absolutely no kind of fluffing around here. Yes, there's a minor love interest, and there's a kind of somebody I was worried she was going to get love interested for because he's good looking, but he's a bit of a dick. But no, that's not what ends up happening. She ends up happily just kind of getting on with her life, and that is something I had a huge amount of time for. And as I said, it's just fast-paced, action, brilliant. It's just like bang, 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 no messing about in here. And before I knew it, it had finished. And I was like, oh my God, I need more of that. And there's even a little bit of a ending where kind of like that Brandon Sanderson thing where he kind of at the very end says, oh, you know, you've been reading about all of this and this kind of is set here. There's a much bigger thing potentially going on that you need to know about. She's got a sequel coming out, I think this year or next year. It's a fantastic book. If you've not had a chance to read it yet, you definitely should. And it will look gorgeous on your bookshelf as well, because that's a stunning front cover. That's Iron Widow. Did I ever say it was called Iron Widow? I think it was called Iron Widow. I said that. Iron Widow by Jiran J. Zhao. 100% recommend it. And again, another book that I've seen on TikTok that I think is well worth your time. The next book is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Now, Andy Weir is an author that you may have heard of because he did The Martian, which is that film with Matt Damon in it where he goes up to space and he's like, why am I here? And then starts building a little mini farm on Mars and then gets back and blah, blah, blah. This is the same author. This is a book about a man called Ryland Grace who wakes up in the middle of space miles from Earth and has absolutely no idea where he is. or why he's there even as well. And we essentially, via his memories, start to build up the puzzles of how he got there, why he's there, what the big scary thing is, and it's awesome. There's so much science kind of guff in here. I think guff means something else, so gubbins. There's also loads of kind of like really cool, oh, that's interesting, and that if that was how that worked in space, that would be how that worked. Does that make sense? No, you know what I mean. If that were to happen, that's how that would work, I think, anyway. It's also emotional. It's also incredibly funny. I listened to this on audiobook. I had the audio and I did do some reading of it as well. And the audiobook was brilliant. The narrator of it absolutely nailed the tone of our main character, of the writing in general, of the other characters that appear in this. It's just one of the best books I've read all year. Really, really worth the hype. I've seen this going around. I think there's different covers to it, so you may not have seen this cover of it. You may have seen a different one. But it's definitely a book worth your time. And the big thing I think I've heard from a lot of people is they're not into kind of science fiction, but this still really interested them. Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir is the 5th book on this list of books that I think, if you've seen them on BookTok, I think they're worth your time reading. And the next book on this list is Sally Rooney's The Normal People. Now, this is a book that I think might come across a little bit controversially. I know some people thought it was incredibly dull. I know some people could not get past the fact that she doesn't actually put speech marks in her writing, which at first was very, very grating on kind of trying to the reading experience. But once you get used to it, you kind of get used to it and you understand what's going on and who's speaking because it's just flowing really, really naturally. The way that she writes, it makes it easy to kind of understand who is actually speaking. And then you go into the book and you go into the story and you start to understand this is actually a really, really good love story. Now, like One Day, it's very British, it's very gritty. This is set in West Ireland. I can't say Ireland without saying an Irish accent. So Ireland, and it's basically it's a good romance story. It's about Cornell and Marianne, and they kind of start off quite young and they learn about their kind of young sexual needs and things like this from high school. Then they kind of part ways when they go off to universities and they come back. Connell's not doing so well and Marianne's doing really well, but that's what you think, and then maybe that's not what's actually happening under the cover and there's some darker things going on. And it's just their kind of constant pull back to one another and their need for each other, but their denial of each other, and that sort of thing. Similar to One Day, where you kind of, sometimes love isn't about some, I don't know, as I said earlier, some ridiculously good looking person not being right for you. Sometimes it's just about you not being able to understand yourself, why you won't let them like you, that sort of thing. And this is exactly what this does. It's written really interestingly, really well. It was really grounding. It's quite short as well. So again, it's one of those books where you think once you finish it, you're like, that didn't take too long. And I really, really enjoyed it. So that's Normal People by Sally Rooney, which is just a fantastic love story again. And there's actually another BBC adaptation of it. I talked about Lessons in Chemistry having a TV adaptation. That was a TV series on Apple TV+. I think this one was BBC or some British one. And that was a good representation as well, and a really, really good. And it's actually got 2 actors who were small at the time and are now going into like international kind of Hollywood films, so you'd recognise them. So that's Sally Rooney's Normal People, another book from BookTok that I think is worth the hype. Next up is Legends and Lattes. This is by Travis Baldry. Now, this was literally, I only found it via BookTok. I'd never heard of this before, and I probably would not have heard of it if I'd never looked online, because it's not really promoted that well. I would say that this is a book that, without BookTok, may not have sold the number of books sales that it did. I'm speaking awfully right now. Anyway, Legends and Lattes is about an orc called Viv, who has been doing quests, who has been killing people, who has been travelling, who has, I don't know, used every sort of weapon you can think of, had big, scary, dark days, and just now wants to set up a little coffee shop in a little town no one's ever heard of. And I absolutely love that. 1, I love coffee. 2, I love coffee shops. 3, I love fancy. So absolutely nailed all of the things I would like to read about. Obviously, there's a little bit of drama in this. There's a kind of a gang leader or a local gang leader who is like, oh, you're on our turf, you need to pay us some money. But she's a big, scary orc who's like been killing people her whole life, so it's not gonna be that easy for them. This is referred to as a cozy fantasy. What that kind of I took from that after finishing it meant that it is not like a fantasy, as I said, that I've talked about, where there's quests and there's big storylines, there's sweeping cultures, there's loads of stuff going on. It's all set really in this coffee shop. Yeah, some small bits are set outside the coffee shop. But other than that, it's all about Viv setting it up and the people that she kind of meets inside there, introducing new products, introducing new people, getting to know new people, and her whole world going from this expansive, massive world, into this small little area that she just has passion for and she wants to make really, really good. I loved it. And this is another book, a bit like with Project Hail Mary, where a lot of people who weren't into sci-fi still enjoyed it. If you're not into fantasy and the idea of her being an orc puts you off, just don't think about it. Just picture her as a normal person, because other than that, it's a very, very kind of plain book. Yes, there's some talks about portals and things like this, but generally you can enjoy this book without having any interest in fantasy whatsoever. And also the front cover is another stunner. Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. Another book that if you've seen it online, I would recommend you do pick up. Taylor Jenkins Reid is another author that goes around on social media all the time. Her Carrie Soto books, her Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, the Daisy Jones books, Malibu Rising, and many others are books that have popped up all over my social media feed. And the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is probably her best, though maybe Daisy Jones and the Six is my other favourite. But either way, you're not going to lose with either of those books that have been showing up everywhere. So Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo covers this Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Evelyn Hugo is a famous movie star from like the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, who's now kind of not in retirement, but it's just that kind of like ethereal Hollywood star that everybody talks about but is no longer in films, and she wants to do one last kind of interview with a newspaper before she dies. She wants only one person to do the interview though, and nobody knows really why. So what we're reading about in this story is about how we get to the point where all of her seven husbands, but also where we get to the point where this person is the only person that she wants to interview her. And it's really, really fascinating, really interesting. And like all of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, if you've not read any of them before, they all kind of do a very similar thing where they talk about a lifetime. They talk about a big life character, somebody who's often famous, and the decades that led up to their fame, during their fame, the fall of their fame, etc. That's exactly what the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is about. The writing's not going to blow your mind, but the story, I think, will really impress you. And you'll come out of it feeling like you've been on a life journey, which is one of my favourite feelings in books, where I feel like I have been through decades of life reading about somebody's story. And that's exactly what you're going to get from the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. So another book I would 100% recommend if you've seen it around online. Now, this next book I was going to put into my overhyped books, but the more I think about it, the more I think I actually really enjoyed it, and I actually gave it a really good rating on my blog. You can check that out here, by the way, if you've not yet had a look at my blog. The Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Now, this is a book that absolutely blew the internet up when it came out. I don't think anybody could have known how big this was going to be. The reason it was big is one, front cover, great, brilliant. Two, it ticks every box that every female reader on BookTok at the moment wants. To be set in a slightly fantasy world, there to be a ridiculously good-looking man with a name that starts with something from the end of the alphabet, for there to be some kind of big grandiose plan, for there to be a little bit of spice kind of involved, for there to be this kind of, he's mean and horrible, but I'm a nice innocent person, but I've got a bit of bulge to me, so I'm going to reject him, but eventually I'm in love with him because that's how all these books work. So it ticked all of those boxes. There were talks of this being the next Harry Potter and being amazing. It's nowhere near that level, so don't expect that. But I did really enjoy it. So in my overhyped books, there's going to be a series in there that you're going to be like, oh my god, I can't believe he's put in there. I don't agree. And that's absolutely fine. If you know what I'm talking about already, you know what I'm talking about. But the things that were different with this is the fantasy world in this actually was going on. So the Fourth Wing follows Violet Sorrengail, who is the daughter of a powerful woman, and is her brother's some successful past, and he died in a war a few years ago. Now she's joining the school that everybody has to go and train at to essentially get your dragon and ride a dragon and etc. But the school is very death-defying. Like, a lot of people die before they even get their dragon. She goes through all the trials. She meets people along the way. It's a good time. And that's what I enjoyed. I enjoyed the fact that Rebecca Yarros actually focused on the fantasy element, the plot. A lot of problems with a lot of romantic books is there's not a lot of plot, there's just a lot of people yearning for each other and talking about how ridiculously muscly they are, and I ain't got time for that. I want people to actually be talking about dragons, and there actually to be a threat and there to be a bigger thing going on outside. Now, the second book I would say isn't great. It's unfortunate because this first book has a lot of potential, and if Rebecca Yarros had just waited a bit longer and thought a little bit more about how to expand this world, build the plot, etc., we could have maybe had a really good series going on here, but the second book wasn't great. There is a bit of a delay between this and the next one. I think it's called Onyx Storm or something, so we'll hope the Onyx Storm is good to make up for the second book. I know another series that's going to be my overhyped I think is expecting to do that as well. But Fourth Wing would be worth your time if you've not yet had a chance to check it out. If you are into your romantasy, you do like your Akators and things like this, you'll 1,000,000% like this. If you are a proper gritty fantasy person, you like your Brandon Sanderson, your John Gwynne, your Robin Hobb, these sort of things, this may not be your kettle of fish, though there are dragons in it, though the dragons do talk and it's a bit cringy sometimes, so but I would think it's definitely worth the hype. Nala! What are you meowing about? Hello, girly. This is my cat Nala. Been outside, I think it's just started rain. She's come in meowing her head off. Say hello. Hello. Okay, anyway, the final book on this list is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Now this is a book that when I very first got into blogging, when I first started writing my reviews online, when I first really got properly back into reading, where I was like, right, I'm going to be reading like 4, 5, 6, 7 books a month. The Song of Achilles was the book that I picked up from this kind of list of, okay, what's everyone reading at the moment? What's everyone hyping at the moment? The Song of Achilles covers the story of Patroclus and Achilles, and there's this big thing in the kind of rumours and the histories that Patroclus was Achilles' best friend, and Song of Achilles says, okay, but what if he wasn't his best friend and they were actually in love? They're actually more than just friends with each other. But Achilles is this big star, this big hero that goes around, that travels, that kills things, that takes part in wars. And Patroclus is notless. He's not a big person. He's not this grandiose person that is involved in this Greek world that anybody really cares about. And what happens when you kind of got this kind of behind the scenes character? My camera's wobbling because Nala is kicking it at the moment. What happens, she had her name, what happens when that all happens? And this is a fantastic love story. It's sad, it's incredibly sad, because inevitably that sort of thing's not going to be enjoyable. But it was really, really, really impressive. And this is a book I actually read quite a long time ago. We're talking years ago now. So the plot specifics evade me a little bit, but I'll never forget the idea, the message, the story behind it. And I enjoyed the war, and I say I enjoyed the war. I enjoyed the war elements. I enjoyed the idea that, as I said, Achilles is this big honed war creature that has been born to do these dark things. And Patroclus like, can you not do them? And Achilles is like, I have to. This is what I have to do. And then Achilles starts liking it, and it all gets dark and it all gets horrible. There are sad moments in this. You can probably guess what they're going to be. Generally, it's a really fantastic book, and it's just a book that I think a lot of people weren't expecting to be as good as it is. Now, this isn't the nicest cover of it, and I'm hoping to get a different cover of it at some point in my life when I have flush with money and I can buy different covers for books that I don't like the covers I've got of now. That doesn't matter. The text is all the same. It was really, really enjoyable. So, if you've heard of The Song of Achilles, I know a lot of people have, and I know you're probably looking at this like, yeah, I've read that one. If you haven't yet, I would definitely recommend it. So it's by Madeline Miller, and it's a book about love, and it's a book about romance, it's a book about war and the struggles of kind of having, it can be the same as if you were kind of like incredibly famous and you had someone who was not famous, what the story's like for the person that's not famous. So they're the 10 books that I think are definitely worth your time, that I think TikTok rightfully hyped up because they're either written fantastically, they were great fun, they featured great stories, they introduced me to a new author that I'm interested in, or I just think, yeah, okay, that was actually a really sound book and people should be reading it. Let me know which of them you enjoyed, but let me know which ones you didn't enjoy. Let me know which ones you don't think are worth the hype, because there's probably going to be some in here that people didn't enjoy, because that's what reading's about. Most importantly, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.